On World News Tonight. Floods in China. China plagued by natural disasters as floods take over a dozen lives. President Xi takes charge of the situation. Missiles launched. The Korean Peninsula is under a tense situation as the South Korean president commemorates 100 days in office. Surprising admission. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention makes a unique admission on how their COVID-19 response did not meet expectations. And revitalization. Industrialization and development take center stage in this region of China.
This is Derana World News Tonight. Reporting from Colombo, here's Danilu Witanawasam.
Good evening and welcome to World News. We start off today's coverage from China. The Provincial Emergency Management Department in China reported that 16 people were confirmed dead and 36 others missing after a mountain flood hit Datonghui and two autonomous county northwestern China's Xinjiang province. Search and rescue efforts are still underway. The disaster occurred earlier today morning, affecting at least 6,245 people in 6 villages. More rains are forecasted to hit the county over the next 24 hours. Severe flooding in southern China in June displaced more than 500,000 people and caused an estimated $250 million in damages. Meanwhile, millions of people in southwest China are facing rolling power cuts after a crushing heat wave led to an electricity supply crunch that has forced factories to halt work. Now, staying in Asia, North Korea fired 2 cruise missiles towards the West Sea. This comes as Seoul and Washington holds preliminary drills ahead of a major combined training that involves live field exercises for the first time in years.
On the day South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol marked his first 100 days in office, North Korea on Wednesday morning fired 2 cruise missiles towards the West Sea. A South Korean military official said the missiles were fired from the northwest coast town of Uncheon without providing further details. This was the first missile launched from the north in more than 2 months, since they fired a ballistic missile on June 5th. The launch also comes as Seoul and Washington hold 4 days of preliminary drills in preparation for their major combined training that has infuriated Pyongyang. Named the Ulji Freedom Shield, the summertime drill will involve live field exercises for the first time in 4 years. It will be held in South Korea from next Monday through September 1st. South Korea's presidential office said its national security advisor held a meeting after Wednesday's launch to assess the security situation and examine the military's readiness. Since 2020, North Korea has reportedly test-fired cruise missiles around 10 times. And in January last year, it announced that it's planning to develop advanced cruise missiles. The regime recently claimed to have developed 2 types of new cruise missiles and unveiled them through their Defense Development Exhibition and military parade. Cruise missiles can be seen as a rather low-level provocation, as most cruise missiles are not designed to carry nuclear warheads. But one expert notes there is a possibility of stronger actions from the north during the combined training period.
A huge explosion has ripped through a crowded mosque in the Afghan capital of Kabul. The blast occurred during evening prayers. The imam is reported to have been among the dead within the blast.
At least 10 people, including a prominent cleric, have died in a bombing during evening prayers at a mosque in Kabul. The exact number of casualties is unclear, but with at least 27 people wounded, including several children, the number of deaths is likely to rise. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the bombing, which is the latest in Afghanistan over the past year since the Taliban seized power. The so-called Islamic State group's local affiliate has stepped up attacks targeting the Taliban and civilians following the withdrawal last year of US and NATO troops.
Over to the United States now, the head of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention acknowledged that the agency fell short of expectations in its handling of the coronavirus pandemic and announced drastic changes for its operations.
Tonight, the CDC director is calling for drastic changes within the agency to better deal with public health emergencies. Dr. Rochelle Walensky now says, in our big moment, our performance did not reliably meet expectations. The agency had been slammed as slow to respond during COVID, also facing backlash after issuing guidance that seemed confusing. The sweeping reorganization includes a new executive council, a new equity office, and a more streamlined website. Walensky also plans to ask Congress to grant the CDC new powers, including mandating that local jurisdictions share their data. The course correction comes as federal health officials face criticism over the monkeypox vaccine rollout. The administration invested more than $1 billion developing it, but has just over 1 million shots on hand. There are also new concerns about polio, just the second instance of U.S. community spread in 43 years. Last week, health officials announced that polio had been detected in New York City wastewater.
Make sure that your children are protected because this is a very, very serious disease.
Today, a polio vaccine clinic opened in Rockland County, New York, an area where the vaccination rate is as low as 37%.
I may have gotten it as a child, but I wasn't sure about my records, so that's why I came to do it.
Now, U.S. stocks fell as Wall Street passed the Federal Reserve's latest minutes. 10 of the 11 primary S&P 500 sectors ended in red, with communication services and materials down by 1.85% and 1.4% respectively. Energy was the lone group that measured gains.
U.S. stocks ended lower on Wednesday, but cut earlier losses after investors saw minutes from the Federal Reserve's meeting in July that suggested policymakers may be less aggressive than previously thought when they raise interest rates in September. The Dow fell 0.5%, the S&P 500 lost nearly 0.75%, while the Nasdaq fell 1.25%. David Bahnsen, managing partner of the Bahnsen Group, said the Fed minutes reinforced the idea that the U.S. central bank might let up on rate hikes.
The markets believe that the Fed is going to continue tightening and talking a certain way, but that they're not going to go any worse or any further than people previously thought. And if the minutes reinforce that we're closer to the end than the beginning, then markets, always price these things in ahead of time. Markets are discounting mechanisms. And so that may very well be how markets are responding to FOMC minutes.
Stocks had been down more sharply ahead of the minutes, with growth shares such as Amazon and chipmaker Nvidia coming under pressure as bond yields rose. Dismal results from Target, shares of which declined 2.75%, weighed on the retail sector, but not shares of Lowe's, which stayed in positive territory after the home improvement chain posted a better-than-expected quarterly profit. And finally, U.S.-listed shares of Manchester United scored a 7% gain after Elon Musk said he was buying the British soccer club, only to say it was part of a, quote, long-running joke. But later, a source told that billionaire Jim Ratcliffe said he was interested in buying the franchise.
Let's take a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Welcome back. Now, Syrian state news agencies are reporting that the US has been stealing oil for a long time from the country, thereby aggravating the crisis condition within the country. It is being reported that since August 11th, the US forces have stolen 398 tankers of Syrian oil and sent them to its bases in Iraq. The US forces, which have taken control of key oil and gas fields in Hasaka with the help of local Kurdish rebels, have regularly smuggled fuels out of Syria. A convoy of 89 and 144 tankers respectively, loaded with stolen oil, was sent to the US bases in Iraq through the same crossing as of last Thursday and Saturday. In the first half of August alone, the US military used nearly 500 tanker trucks to smuggle Syrian oil at least 6 times, which had left the Syrian people without fuel and greatly aggravated the humanitarian crisis in Syria. Syria, which was once an oil-producing country, now has to rely on imports to meet demands. The theft by US troops has caused insufficient energy supply in Syria and pushed up the international oil prices, which makes life even unbearable for the Syrian people who have long suffered the scourge of protracted war. Over to Angola now. Thanks to a change in the law last year, Angolans living abroad will be able to vote for the first time in the general election to be held on the 24th of August.
At 51 years old, Angolan chef Paulo Soares is looking forward to voting for the first time. He works at a restaurant in Portugal's capital, Lisbon. Until a change in the law last year, members of Angola's diaspora had to travel back to the country to vote. Soares says being able to take part fills him with emotion.
This time I'm going to vote. I'm 51 years old and I'm finally going to be able to vote, to be part of some decisions taken in my country.
Around 14 million Angolans, both home and abroad, head to the polls on August 24th. It's likely to be the tightest and tensest election since the Southern African country's first multi-party vote in 1992. Current President João Lourenço from the MPLA is seeking a second 5-year term, but the opposition UNITA, led by Adalberto Costa Jr., is putting up a fight. An Afrobarometer survey in May showed the proportion of Angolans favouring UNITA had risen from 13% in 2019 to 22%, with nearly half of voters undecided. Another of those voting for the first time is one of Soares's customers, Dania Silva. She moved to Portugal, Angola's former colonial ruler, a month ago. The 22-year-old says she's excited to contribute to her country, though also has doubts.
I have faith, but to be honest, and in a more practical way, I believe there will not be political change. Because there is a lot of vote manipulation.
Every ballot cast abroad and in all of Angola's provinces has to be sent to the capital Luanda to be counted. Analysts say that's raised fears of voter fraud. UNITA says 2.5 million deceased people are registered to vote, although the electoral registry says that's likely to be because family members did not communicate the death to authorities or buried their loved ones in clandestine graves. Concerns have also been raised over the number of election observers. Members of civil society have urged people to remain at polling stations to monitor the process. The head of the National Electoral Commission has said that would be illegal, and promised that the election will be impartial and transparent.
Well, the American space agency NASA has rolled out its giant new moon rocket to prepare it for a maiden flight. The debut outing is a test with no crew on board, but future missions will send astronauts back to the lunar surface for the first time in over 50 years.
After a slow overnight crawl, Artemis is now on the launch pad, the most powerful rocket ever, ready for a new chapter in human exploration.
It's a future where NASA will land the first woman and the first person of color on the moon.
But first, this critical uncrewed test flight set for August 29th. Artemis will carry the Orion crew capsule, speeding to a 42-day mission orbiting the moon. If the flight goes well, humans could orbit the moon within 2 years. Then a moon landing in 2025 or 2026, an orbiting lunar space station and moon base before going on to Mars.
I can bounce gently in this spacesuit and not very unlike what I can do on Earth.
At NASA's training pool in Houston, engineers and astronauts are already testing new spacesuit designs for future moonwalks. That means dropping thick black curtains to block the light, and they've covered the bottom with sand and rock to recreate the conditions on the moon.
This is very similar to what the Apollo astronauts did in preparation for their missions to the moon.
New technology and a new space race as China promises that soon its own astronauts will also be on the moon.
We have some good news for you. A South Korean research team has developed a tactile sensor that can measure the hardness and softness of an object. Combining this with artificial intelligence, the researchers say they can detect breast cancer with 96% accuracy.
This sensor looks like an ordinary semiconductor chip. However, when pressed against an object, the sensor produces electrical signals of different frequencies, indicating how hard or soft the object is. Researchers have been able to determine and standardize the frequency change according to the hardness of the object. This is the first time that a tactile sensor has been developed to accurately distinguish the hardness level.
Humans can easily distinguish the hardness level, but it is very difficult to make a device that can distinguish hardness. However, it is significant that we have further developed a technology that can quantify the hardness level.
Combining the tactile sensor and AI, researchers are now able to screen for breast cancer. A special ultrasound sensor image that shows the degree of elasticity was used to determine whether or not the subject was positive for breast breast cancer. The technology allows for a very high success rate in detecting the disease at 95.8%. The test also means people can be tested for breast cancer pain-free with just simple touch of the sensor. This technology is expected to be useful not only for cancer diagnosis, but also for recognizing the boundary of invasion of tumors or diseases in robotic surgery, where doctors cannot touch the surgical site.
Welcome back. For more news, let's take you around the world in a minute. Ukraine's president has condemned a Russian attack that the region's governor said killed at least 6 people and wounded 16 in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second city, as despicable and cynical. President Zelensky said a block of flats had been totally destroyed, which he said had no justification and shows the powerlessness of the aggressor. Germany's gas reserves will only be enough to run heating and industrial facilities for about 2.5 months if Russia cuts off supplies completely, according to Klaus Müller, president of the Federal Network Agency, the country's energy regulator. Müller said that Germany is now speeding up the stockpiling of gas in preparation for winter and reserves should be 85% filled by October. Rudy Giuliani testified before a special grand jury in Atlanta in a Georgia criminal probe examining attempts by former President Donald Trump and his allies to overturn the 2020 election results. The testimony took over 6 hours. People in Nelson within New Zealand, a city with a population of more than 50,000, showered mud off the streets and were left with debris strewn across their properties after the latest rainstorms worsened conditions in the sodden landscape. More than 230 homes in the city have been evacuated, with many public facilities and roads closed. The remains of an Indian Army soldier have been found more than 38 years after he went missing on a glacier at the highest point along the heavily militarized contested border between India and Pakistan in Kashmir. The soldier and 17 other colleagues were occupying a ridge on Siachen Glacier, high in the Karakoram range in disputed Kashmir's Ladakh region. And that's all the news we got for you tonight. Join us again tomorrow for more news from around the globe. If you have missed any of the stories we aired tonight, you can rewatch by catching us on our YouTube page, youtube.com/otherderana-English. As we leave you tonight, we look at a province in China. Liaoning province in the northeastern China has made great strides in revitalization as the province continues to rejuvenate its old industrial bases, promote high-quality development and consolidate the foundation of agriculture. With an area of over 148,000 square kilometers, an offshore water area of 68,000 square kilometers and a permanent population of 42.294 million, Liaoning province's GDP last year stood at 2.75 trillion yuan, an increase of 5.8% over the previous year. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night.